Good evening, everyone. I am Roxana Dean, President of the League of Women Voters of the Comal area. The Comal Area League serves Comal and Guadalupe counties. We envision a democracy in which every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members in the public. Anyone 16 years and older may join the League, and it's not for women only. Please visit our website, lwvcomal.org, for more information. Everyone has been muted, should be muted, and your video turned off. This will make for a smoother meeting. If you're viewing us on Facebook, you can type your questions into chat. If you're on Zoom, put your questions into chat, and if you're on Facebook, write your questions as comments. I'd like to introduce Daphne Spraitzar, Program Vice President for the Comal Area League. In that role, she leads advocacy efforts for the League. She's been working on the issue of redistricting for most of the last year. Daphne.
Thank you, Roxanne, and I would like to welcome everybody to this presentation on a status update on redistricting this year. And the goal of this presentation really is to help you all understand the importance of redistricting, the process, and the actions the League of Women Voters of Comal area and the public can take to ensure a more fair and open redistricting process in Texas in 2021. Before I get started, I would like to thank and welcome Stephanie Swanson, the League of Women Voters Texas Redistricting Issue Chair and Fairmax Texas spokesperson, for agreeing to be with us tonight. Stephanie has led and directed League of Women Voters Texas advocacy efforts with regard to redistricting with the Texas State House and Senate over the last 3 years, including all the hearings and meetings. She also has worked closely with Redistricting Coalition partners and League of Women Voter US partners to push for a more fair and open redistricting process for Texas. We are very fortunate to have her with us and that she was able to clear her calendar at this very busy time. And I'm going to share my screen with you now to okay. So we're going to go to okay. So tonight we're going to start with a 2018 CBS Sunday Morning Gerrymandering 101 video, which gives us a common definition of and context for redistricting, which is a very complex process. After the video, we'll give you a status update on redistricting, and the Texas Legislature 87th session describe things to consider when talking with legislators and staff, and what the redistricting timeline looks like moving forward and how you can get involved. And we'll end by fielding your questions, which you will be putting on Zoom chat or Facebook comments. So thank you very much, and we'll start with the video.
Federal judges this past week ordered a redrawing of the lines between congressional districts in North Carolina, while the Supreme Court agreed to hear an appeal of a similar ruling in Texas. And then there's Pennsylvania, which features a congressional map that some critics say looks like a cartoon. Our cover story is reported by Mo Rocca.
Goofy's over there and he's kicking Donald.
No, what? I thought that Goofy was here doing the kicking. You think this is Goofy kicking Donald?
I don't know.
This is not a Rorschach test, and these are not patients.
So those are his ears flapping.
Oh, the ears are flapping. Oh, okay, I get it.
They're suburban Philadelphia voters who live next door to Pennsylvania's 7th Congressional District, nicknamed Goofy Kicking Donald for its absurd, well, you can see why.
Wait a minute, just
Daphne, we can't hear it.
Much. Gerrymandering is
Second.
the manipulation of voting district lines, usually to give one party an advantage over the other. The word comes from Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry, who in 1812 signed off on this salamander-shaped district, hence the term gerrymander, which sounds a lot better than gerrymander. Okay, there are 435 members in the House of Representatives. Pennsylvania has a lot of people, so it gets 18 House seats. Like so. Now, some of these shapes, not just the 7th, are pretty wacky. We can all agree on that. Now, I know you're asking, why not just lay a nice rectangular grid over Pennsylvania? Problem solved, right? Well, you can't do that because people don't live evenly spread out. You got a lot of people over in Philly, a bunch over in Pittsburgh, not a lot of people in those places with no dots. Personally, I live over in Hershey. And each district has to have the same number of people. For that reason, and others we'll get to later, the shapes of districts are almost never going to be perfect squares. But how these shapes got to be so wacky is the issue here. Pennsylvania Democrats say the Republican-controlled state house drew these lines, or gerrymandered them, to create as many safe Republican seats as possible. Last election, Republicans won little more than half of the statewide vote, but the lion's share of congressional seats, 13 out of 18. Thank you for listening. And now let's return to our angry voters.
We're not getting the representation that we were intended to get, and the politicians just jiggle it around to meet their needs, not our needs.
They're angry because they say their Democratic-leaning communities were deliberately kept out of the 7th and lumped into the heavily Republican 16th district, ensuring that both went red.
It causes people, I think, to wonder, why should they even go out to vote? Is my vote going to count?
It was done to us personally, and there is no rational justification for that other than blind, naked power.
But I do think it's very difficult for us to try to draw these lines.
Both parties are guilty of gerrymandering.
Notorious examples of gerrymandering.
And both parties have long decried it.
The fact is, gerrymandering has become a national scandal.
It is absolutely essential that we block the gerrymandering ways of the Democratic Party.
But increasingly, the discussion around gerrymandering has been about the threat it poses to American democracy itself. Few current representatives want to talk about it. Iowa's Rod Blum does.
We shouldn't have to rig the system in our favor, or the Democrats shouldn't have to rig the system in their favor.
Blum is a Tea Party Republican who represents Iowa's 1st, a Democratic-leaning district. Blum says he can't afford to ignore any of his constituents.
With gerrymandering, the politician knows that they can be extreme right or extreme left and get reelected. If the district was more like mine, split evenly, then you're looking at every bill. What's a Republican think of this? What's a Democrat think of this? What's an independent think of it?
His is not a typical district. Nationwide gerrymandering is one reason that the number of competitive congressional seats, those where both parties have a good shot of winning, has plunged for the past 20 years from 164 to just 72. Now keep an eye on Pennsylvania's 7th. Those district lines we've been talking about are redrawn every 10 years, right after the census, usually by the state legislature, in a process known as redistricting. Get a load of how the 7th has changed over the years. Few know this process better than Kim Brace. For more than 40 years, he's been hired, mostly by Democrats, to help draw congressional districts. He was the only map maker we identified that was willing to talk to us on camera. You've got a lot of power in your pen.
That's true. It's not your pen. It's now a mouse.
It's okay. It's
Okay.
a mouse.
It's a mouse.
And armed with mountains of voter data, it's become more science than art. Theoretically, you could say to a Republican incumbent, listen, the 5300 block of River Road is a lot more Democratic now. Let's cut that out.
Sure.
We draw the map.
Sure, that's possible. That's possible.
But Brace says there are a lot of factors that have to be considered. For instance, districts have to be contiguous. Communities of interest should be kept together. And how about this one?
Incumbent requests and incumbent protection
is something that the courts have recognized is a fact of redistricting life.
Incumbent protection, like they're spotted owls.
Or something along that line, yes.
But this was precisely the rationale back in 2001 when, to protect the seat of Illinois Democrat Bobby Rush, Kim Brace cut out this residential block, home to a young primary challenger named Barack Obama.
You gerrymandered the future president of the United States out of a congressional district.
Right. So he then went for U.S. Senate and used that elevation to then become president.
Not even a president could do what you did.
Probably not, I guess.
The general perception, it seems, not just from Democrats, from a lot of Republicans who want limits on gerrymandering, is that gerrymandering is bad for democracy.
It's not always the case, but one person's gerrymander is another one's beautiful art creation.
There may be no better example of this than Brace's most famous or infamous creation, Illinois' 4th, better known as the earmuffs. It was drawn to comply with the Voting Rights Act, which mandates that racial minorities be able to elect one of their own. And so he connected 2 Latino neighborhoods on Chicago's west side by this narrow highway corridor.
So we're in the 4th right now.
That's correct.
But you say there, over here, I'm in the Illinois 7th. And now I'm in the Illinois 4th. Now I'm in the Illinois 5th. So 3 different districts right there.
That's correct. Right there.
That's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
Back in the 1990s, it was racial gerrymandering like this that dominated the discussion. Then in 2010, the GOP launched an ambitious campaign to win control of state governments and redraw the lines in their favor. They succeeded in a big way.
It was a sea change. We've now seen Congress being in control by the Republicans for this entire decade.
While Republican House candidates won about half of the nationwide vote in 2016, they took 55% of the seats, 241 to the Democrats' 194. But, and this is important, even if lines were not being drawn to favor Republicans, Democrats would still be at something of a disadvantage, says Stanford political scientist Jonathan Roden.
Suburbs and excess.
That's because of where they live.
Democrats have been clustered in cities in the industrialized states ever since the New Deal. Ever since FDR, cities have become more Democratic and rural areas more Republican.
Roden studies how increasingly Republicans are spread across rural areas and Democrats packed into urban areas. Consider the influence on a state like Missouri.
The Democrats are highly concentrated in St. Louis and Kansas City. The gubernatorial elections are always very close. It's a place that Democrats can win statewide. But the best they can hope for in an 8-seat congressional delegation is 3 seats, and the current outcome is 2.
So is the issue gerrymandering or geography?
It's geography and gerrymandering. In order to understand the outcomes we see, we have to understand how those 2 things interact.
Hey, ho, ho, gerrymandering has to go.
But it's gerrymandering that's before the U.S. Supreme Court right now. A ruling is expected this spring. And Iowa's Rod Blum is willing to risk any advantage gerrymandering currently gives his party.
If putting curbs on partisan gerrymandering meant ceding control of the House to the Democrats, how would you feel about that?
I'm okay with it. We need to recruit good candidates, and we need to get out there, and we need to do a good job of governing, and we need to sell our message to the voters.
Losing an election is no small thing.
And I think the opposite. I think, if you lose an election, it's okay. That's the way our government is set up, not to have these people be here 30, 40, 50 years.
As for our voters in Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court is considering redrawing the map. For them, a decision can't come soon enough.
Everyone wants to be treated fairly. Gerrymandering isn't fair. It's cheating. It's taking our votes and putting them where they won't make a difference.
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, so that film segment, as we mentioned, is 3 years old. So I'm going to ask Stephanie to kind of bring us up to date on what's been happening with redistricting and the courts at this time.
So this case out of Pennsylvania, what they decided to do and what they figured out how to do, and it was actually the League of Women Voters that kind of led the charge up there behind this case, was they took a partisan gerrymandering claim through their state courts. And so the case went all the way up to their state Supreme Court, and they actually decided that, yes, you can have too much partisan gerrymandering. And so they overturned the congressional maps in Pennsylvania and ordered them to be redrawn. And I believe a mathematician by the name of Moon Duchan actually helped analyze the new maps that they drew. Anyways, we won't go into that. But at any rate, at the national level, partisan gerrymandering has gone up all the way to the US Supreme Court. And that was just recently, back in 2019, that they ruled that partisan gerrymandering was too much of a political question. They couldn't figure out how to accurately measure how much partisan gerrymandering was too much. They had a lot of mathematicians involved. They proposed a few different analyses to measure actually how much was too much. But the Supreme Court said it was gobbledygook, and they decided that they weren't going to hear any more cases surrounding partisan gerrymandering. Unfortunately, though, in states like the South, that has major implications. Oftentimes, especially in the South, you see race and partisanship going hand in hand. And so when the Supreme Court decided that not only they weren't going to hear any more partisan gerrymandering cases, but they also finalized our Supreme Court case for racial gerrymandering here in the state, it was a rather big blow for our community down here in Texas. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in 2011 with our district maps that the state legislator drew. So unfortunately, and I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer or anything like that, it's just the truth of the matter of what happened. In 2011, Texas drew maps that were found to be, I think they were found to both violate the Voting Rights Act, and they intentionally discriminated against voters of color. We were the only state in the nation not to gain preclearance of our maps. For those of you who don't know what preclearance is or was, preclearance was a part of the Voting Rights Act. It said for any jurisdictions that had a history of racial discrimination, you would need to get any changes to your election laws approved by the Justice Department or a federal authority. And so Texas had been found, actually, most of the cases that where the state had violated the Voting Rights Act were actually in our redistricting plans. Texas actually was found to either violate the Voting Rights Act or intentionally discriminate in our redistricting plans every decade for the past 50 years. In 2013, though, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. So they removed all states out from underneath the preclearance provision. They said that the way that we determined which jurisdictions were under preclearance was outdated, because at the time when the Voting Rights Act was created or was written and enacted, there was still stuff like poll taxes and literacy tests and stuff like that. And the Supreme Court said, this is outdated, Congress needs to redo it. Congress wasn't able to reinstate or rework the Voting Rights Act, though, because Republicans had heavily gerrymandered in 2010 with Project Red Map. So we've been left in limbo for the past 7 years now. And now we're going to be entering this next round of redistricting without our maps undergoing review by a federal authority. And so that's my spiel about our maps right now.
So the result of the 2010 or 2013 redistricting at the congressional level in Texas is shown on this map. And what it points out is that you would have to look hard to find a populated area of Texas, a city or large town, that was not gerrymandered, and particularly Austin into 5 districts. And Stephanie, do you want to talk about cracking and stacking? But it's divided into 5 areas. So if you live in Austin, on one side of Austin, you could be in the congressional district, and 3 blocks over, it's another congressional district. And it's just in 5 separate redistricting districts, but also Dallas, also Houston, also really our area, San Antonio, even El Paso to some extent has a problem with it. But did you want to add anything to that or not?
With cracking and packing, that is the way that legislators manipulate district lines. And so when they crack, Travis County is actually a great example of cracking. So when you look, Travis County has been a Democratic pillar surrounded by a sea of red for almost the past 100 years. It was a House district of LBJ back in 1947, whenever he was in the House, or yeah. At any rate, when you look at what the legislator has done to the county, they've carved it up into 5 separate districts. And these districts, you know, start on the west side of Austin and run all the way over to the west side of Houston. Congressional District 25, which I live in, goes all the way from San Marcos all the way up to Fort Worth. And so the point of doing that, though, is to take this very strong Democratic base, I guess, like a large Democratic population, and split it up and mix it into the more rural conservative vote, basically. So you're basically, it's called vote dilution. You're diluting their voice. And so Travis County in Austin is the largest city in the US that does not have an anchor district, meaning that we don't have one whole district contained in our city. So our needs are being split up amongst 5 Congress members. And it's very difficult to actually get a hold of a lot of the Congress members here in Austin, unfortunately. Packing is the opposite. So with packing, they try to concentrate voters of one party or one race into a single district. And the reason that they're doing that is to minimize their influence in neighboring districts. So again, that's a form of vote dilution. And that's all I wanted to add on that.
Thank you. So I'm going to drill down into the congressional districts that affect the Comal area. So on the left, you see districts 35 and 21. So here is Austin, and that's the 5 districts. So just U.S. Congressional District 21 starts in Austin and snakes down through Hays County into Comal County, but picks up Blanco, Gillespie, Kerr, Real, Bandera, and then still goes down into like the northern and western parts of San Antonio, diluted. And so basically also splitting up San Antonio as well as Austin, and it kind of splits us too. 35 is one of the more weird, most gerrymandered districts in Texas as a result of the 2010 redistricting. And it starts in Austin again and moves southwest along I-35, which this is I-35, 4 miles either side of I-35 into San Antonio and the eastern and southeastern portions of San Antonio. So for us in New Braunfels, and New Braunfels, you can't really see, there's a little bump there that kind of mirrors 337 loop on the inside. We're split into 3 congressional districts. So again, the same thing that Stephanie said about Austin applies to us. I mean, why did 3 different US congressmen represent our town, which is not that, I mean, it's 100,000 going towards, but why is that? We have the same interests, all of us in New Braunfels, but they're not the same as somebody living out on a ranch in Kerr County or really even Austin. So we're not represented as we should be. So the other one I want to talk to is on the right here. If you can see it, Congressional District 15, which does start in Seguin, Guadalupe, and it goes all the way down through Hidalgo County to the Mexican border, McAllen area. So again, what does McAllen and the border area, the concerns of those communities have to do with, how are they the same as Seguin? So the bottom line is we want communities to tell the redistricting committees of the Texas House and Senate, who are responsible for doing the redistricting, what their needs are. And we want the committees to take the community's needs into account and to be heard. And districts should be drawn to best serve the voters and communities they live in, to address the challenges and opportunities that the communities face and not make it more difficult in that regard. Okay, so the next subject are the 2019-2020 public input hearings of the Texas House and Senate redistricting hearings. Basically, the Senate Redistricting Committee didn't last year. They had scheduled some, but they were stopped by COVID. The House Committee held some. They were stopped by COVID in March. And so the House Committee hasn't. You can update us. I'll just ask Stephanie, can you update us on where the committees are with regard to public input hearings for going forward?
So because our legislator, it's funny when I talk to national partners, we describe it as the Wild West of legislators because it's very fitting for Texas, but we only meet once every other year for our legislative session, which is not I don't want to say it's not normal. It's not very frequent for a legislator to do that. Most legislators went to a more consistent schedule a long time ago. At any rate, we meet once every other year. Not only that, but our legislative session is very short. It started last week and it's going to end now at the end of May. So we have a little less than 5 months to meet and get bills adopted and passed. So because of this, and because our maps are drawn as regular legislation, and because the state has been in trouble so much with federal courts for violating the Voting Rights Act, what they like to do is hold public input hearings to get input from their public on where their communities of interest lie. This was a very important component of the Voting Rights Act. And so the state always likes to check this off their list in case they get called into litigation. They can say, no, look, we tried to include the public. But because our legislative session is so short, they hold these public input hearings in the interim between sessions. And so the House actually started holding their public input hearings back in September, I think it was August or September of 2019. And they actually got through 13 hearings across the state, out of a schedule of 28 though originally, but once COVID struck, they had to stop holding them. The Senate, unfortunately, they had planned to start holding them in February of this past year, but then again, COVID struck and they had to postpone their hearings as well. The Fair Maps Texas Coalition actually advocated very strongly throughout this past year for them to continue holding these hearings virtually. But they claimed that they could not do that because of the House and Senate rules. They said that virtual committee hearings weren't allowed. We went back and forth several times with formal letters that we wrote to both committees. And again, they still held on to, we can't do this. We can't do it because of the way our rules are written. So now, this past week, the House and Senate met for the start of the 87th legislative session. They showed up, gavelled in, and the first thing that they usually do is move to adopt their procedural rules that they're going to follow for this legislative session. And those procedural rules play a very important part to the timeline of the redistricting process. Those rules lay out whether or not they're going to have virtual hearings in a pandemic. It lays out how much time they notify the public about hearings. That means how much time they notify the public that they have a map ready for you to review, how much time they'll allow for a floor amendment, like any changes to the maps to be introduced, and just very technical stuff, but it's all very important for a fair and open process. So at any rate, this past week, the Senate decided that they were going to continue to, or I guess start holding public input hearings virtually. And the only committee that they allowed this for was for the Senate Redistricting Committee. The House Redistricting Committee, unfortunately, I don't think there will be any more House redistricting hearings. Nonetheless, you can still submit written testimony directly to the committee clerk, and we'll show you at the end of the talk how to do that.
Okay. We're going to update on the census because that kind of drives when they do the maps, when we get that data. Census has been delayed. We knew that that was going to happen. There was a delay because of COVID for 3 months in doing the census. They didn't change their timeline though, but they missed their timeline. They were supposed to get apportionment of data to the president by December 31st. They missed that. Now it looks like the February 9th. However, since that came out, it looks like it may be delayed further. The director of the Census Bureau, Stephen Dillingham, submitted his resignation, which is effective today. And there are questions about the accuracy and validity of the count raised by the IG and others. So that may delay it further. And I'm going to ask Stephanie to talk about why that's important and how that affects the timeline for redistricting in Texas.
So remember, for our legislative session, we only have 5 months, and really it's shorter than that because the first 60 days that the legislator meets, they can't work on any bills. They can file bills, but they can't get them through committees or to the floor or anything like that. So when the census data comes in and when it's delivered to the state, that's the redistricting data basically, that's very important as far as how quickly these maps need, the legislation for the maps needs to move through the legislator. So for a year that we didn't have COVID, usually what would happen is the data would come down about mid-February. And then the legislator would meet, but then after that it'd be rapid fire and the maps would quickly move through the legislative process. Now, because of all of the delays with the census data, there is a very, very good chance that the census data is going to come in after the legislative session. And if it comes in after the legislative session, the governor will have to call a special session to work on the maps. If it comes in towards the end of the legislative session, still like the month of May, both committee chairs have said that that still is too late to actually get legislation through. So most likely they're still saying that a special session would have to be called. If the census data comes in April though, there is a good chance that the backup committee, or I'm sorry, the backup commission would be called in to work on the state legislative maps, and only the state legislative maps. That's all they're allowed to work on. So for the backup commission, it consists of 5 members. It's the lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, comptroller, land commissioner, and the attorney general. Currently, all 5 of those seats are held by Republicans, so it would not be a bipartisan process whatsoever. To be honest, though, a lot of legislators don't want to see that happen. And in order for the maps to get passed to the backup commission, you basically have to have gridlock in the legislature, meaning that, you know, they'd have to have the maps, the bills would have to have already passed through the legislature, and there would have to be some sort of gridlock, some sort of holdup to prevent the maps from going through, and that's when the backup commission gets called in. Nonetheless, that is a possibility. I mean, it's a crazy year, so anything is possible this year, so we just have to keep an eye on it. And that will kind of, you know, delineate how our advocacy efforts will unfold over the session. We are going to need folks kind of like on a quick response team to, you know, call legislators on committees and stuff like that. And we can talk about that in a few minutes.
Have you heard anything, any rumors or other information about legislators trying to go ahead and get a jump start on drawing them based on last year's census data, not from the decennial, but from the American Community Survey? Was there any anything like that happening that you know of?
Right now, currently, they have shell bills that have been filed because the filing deadline for legislation usually occurs before the census data comes in. So they always file these shell bills, but yes, both Legislative Council, which is the nonpartisan lawyers type folk at the legislators, has said that that is a good possibility that the legislator will start using ACS data to get a head start, head start on the maps. Like Daphne said, ACS data it occurs periodically throughout the decade, but it's not an official 100% count like the census is. It's a survey, so they only survey 10% of the population. But that's where we get our data on race and ethnicity that we use to draw our districts with. So theoretically, the legislator does have enough information right now to start drawing those maps ahead of time.
Legislation bills filed. Can you speak to what's been filed? I think there are a couple of bills that propose an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, a couple of different versions. Can you talk to that on what that would do and if other states do it, and which one of those that have been filed the League of Women Voters of Texas it kind of prefers or thinks is best?
So one popular way to get out of this mess of partisan gerrymandering is to enact something called an independent redistricting commission. Arizona was the first state to do it. California followed suit back in 2010, 2011. Basically, the idea behind this is to take the power of drawing district maps away from elected officials and give it to a nonpartisan body. Usually the commission, the Citizens Commission, would be balanced of bipartisanship. So you'd have, for example, if you had, in California, I think they have 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 declined to state or basically independents. The important part, though, is that they use nonpartisan criteria to draw the maps. So everything that Daphne just pointed out with what was wrong with the district maps in Como County, how you guys have lost your voice of representation because what the legislator has done is drawn maps based on partisanship. And so they've split Como County into 3 districts. A lot of these districts go out into funny areas and you don't have anything in common. So these independent commissions use nonpartisan criteria. So they look specifically at stuff like, where's your neighborhood? Which neighborhood is most like yours? What do you have in common with them? Where are your lines of transportation? Do you have a shared economy? Trying to think of some other stuff like watershed areas. Or you might be working on a specific problem in the community. Maybe you're trying to increase jobs. Maybe you're trying to fight crime, so on and so forth. So this nonpartisan criteria, this is what usually defines a community. That's what these commissions consider. Not only that, but they hold a whole series of public input hearings across the state to find out from people where their actual neighborhoods and communities are. And they do their best to try to keep those neighborhoods and communities together. And like I said, they don't know who is a Democrat. They don't know who's a Republican. They don't use any partisan data when they draw the maps. So we'd like to see something like that here in Texas. To be honest with you, though, that's a very long ways off. If Democrats had won the House this past election cycle, there might have been a small possibility that that would have brought Republicans to the table to negotiate a more fair process of drawing maps. But since that didn't happen, Republicans are in control and they're not going to give up the power of drawing district maps. The governor has been on record stating that time and time again for the past 4 or 5 years. So anyways, we filed legislation once again. Representative Mary Gonzalez from the El Paso area filed, I know people don't like to be compared to California, but the IRC bill that we chose to work with and support fully is, it mimics the California model. And the reason for that is just because we had a board member of Common Cause who actually helped write the legislation and was able to explain to us in detail why it was so great. But it really is, it does a really good job of removing political influence from the process of drawing maps. So that one that Representative Mary Gonzalez filed is only for for U.S. congressional districts. And that is just a state statute. So yeah, so there's that one, and the league does support it. I know Donna Howard has also filed legislation for a bipartisan commission. I believe her legislation was very similar to former state senator Jeff Wentworth, who I think represented your area not too long ago before Donna Campbell won the district. So anyways, Jeff Wentworth was actually a very big supporter of fair redistricting practices because he had been around in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when Democrats heavily gerrymandered against Republicans. And he supported that legislation even when Republicans were in control of the redistricting process. So just something to keep in mind. So at any rate, we also support Representative Howard's legislation as well.
Okay. Is there any federal legislation on the horizon that we might want to be looking at or just to keep an eye on?
So at the federal level, a lot of people might have been hearing talk in the news the past few days of an omnibus bill called HR1. Omnibus just means that there's a lot of stuff in it. It hits on a lot of different areas. So with HR1, it's called the For the People Act. It takes care of a lot of what the league considers bad Supreme Court cases over the past 10 years. So it deals with, what am I trying to say? Money in politics, campaign finance, basically. There's ethics reform in there. There's a lot of election reforms. And in the election reform section, there's a part on creating independent redistricting commissions for congressional level districts. So we'll have to wait and see how that moves through Congress. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We are moving forward. So within Texas, the part of the legislature charged with doing the maps, drawing the maps, are the redistricting committees of the House and Senate. So as we reach out to speak with decision makers on those committees and their staffers, if we're in the League of Women Voters, under the guidance of, within the guidance of the state league and our local league president, these are the people. These are the people that actually that make the decisions about the maps. The chair and vice chair, the committee members who are our committee members, that represent us on these, that happen to also be on the committees. That would be people that we want to for sure have relationships with, develop and maintain relationships with, and other members who support fair, open, and transparent redistricting process. And I always say that we don't want to forget their staffers, because their staffers, number one, are easier to reach, and they are the ones that actually do the homework and do the research for the members on these issues, so they actually know as much or more. They know their members. They're able to articulate what their members' ideas and positions are, and they basically run things. So it's also important that we reach out and establish and maintain relationships with them. Within the committees, there's the single most important staffer is the committee clerk, which is the head staffer of the committee, and works also for the chair of the committee, but runs the meetings and the hearings and preps the members and makes sure that they have the information they need to do hearings. They produces transcripts, approves and produces transcripts, all of those things, and just manages that whole process to include when they get together to vote on or mark up the bills. So those are very important and key people. And then the other personal staff that work for the members of those committees. I'm going to I'm showing here the House Redistricting Committee. They haven't actually, the legislature hasn't actually said who's on that committee this year. However, these are the people that were on the committee last year. They haven't published their list yet, and all of them were reelected. And I think, and Stephanie, you can comment, I think that this will be the 80 or 90% solution as far as returning members to the committee. Comal area doesn't have anybody on this committee right now. Our districts are 73 Biedermann and 45 Kumpel. So Neither of those guys are on here, but we do have folks who are on, represent Austin and San Antonio. The chair is Phil King, and the vice chair is Chewy, I think. Anyway, the vice chair is over here, Chris Turner. So Stephanie, do you have any insights into the House Redistricting Committee? You worked very closely with them and their staffers last year during the hearings. That you would like to?
We didn't work too closely with them. We just sent them a few letters telling them, yeah, hey, you need to follow the Voting Rights Act again. At any rate, I don't know. This committee could very well completely change. Most likely, though, you'll see the chair stay in charge of the committee. And that was probably a good idea because he was around and attended all of these public input hearings that they held around the state. So it'd be nice to have at least one person that was around that sat through these hearings that knows what they're doing. I can't tell you though for sure. Back in 2019? Yeah, 2019, when Speaker Bonin arranged the committees, he actually increased the number of people sitting on this committee to 14. So I'm not quite sure, since we have a new Speaker of the House, I'm not quite sure what he has in store, so we'll have to wait and see. Actually sometime soon probably, because we're getting close to the end of January. So hopefully that'll be announced soon.
Okay. And the next is the Senate Select Committee on Redistricting. And the Senate has published their list. The two new members are Senator Nathan Johnson and Senator Brian Birdwell. And the two that left the committee were Pete Flores, who represented the 19th district, and Pat Fallon, who was District 30th district, and it was up in this area. So pretty much, so in our Comal area member of that committee is Senator Donna Campbell, representing Senate District 25. We are attempting to have a relationship with her. We have not met with her this year, but we intend to establish and maintain a relationship with her. And now this committee is scheduling hearings next week. So, so there is an opportunity to provide input. Stephanie, do you have any input, any word on how the hearings will be organized, or how we can best prepare for those hearings that start next week, like 2 or 3 days, 3 days from now?
They're still tentative dates as of right now. And it looks like they're only gonna give us the 3-day head start that they said that they were going to use when they laid out the rules last week, the Senate rules. So, but they pat on themselves on the back for giving us 3 days. I'd like to point out though that a federal district court said that was grossly insufficient, that you aren't really trying to include the public, you need to give them more of a notice. At any rate, these hearings that the Senate will be holding are all going to be done in a virtual format. They're working out right now how to allow people to provide testimony. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read through the notes yet. And I'll pass a league member who's on the line tonight, Judy Ackerman, might be able to jump on at the end of the call to fill us in on that. She wrote to the committee clerk and said, hey, I'm first on the list, or El Paso's first on the list. I'd like to know a little more information. How do people log in? How do they sign up to testify? So if Judy can jump on at the end, she might be able to fill you in.
Right. Okay, I'm going to move on. Talking points and messengers. Obviously, if we're in the League of Women Voters, then the critical or key messengers are leadership of the Texas League of Women Voters, the presidents of the local leads under their leadership. But even if you're not a member of the League of Women Voters, if you are a constituent or a resident of Texas, you can provide input and you can engage with these members to provide your position on a fair and open redistricting process. So these talking points about the creation that Stephanie's already mentioned, about the creation of an independent citizens redistricting commission, and all of the things that would go with that, even if we don't get the commission, if the committee could move closer to these under the rules that they currently have, where all of these discussions and hearings be nonpartisan, that hearings be held after census apportionment data is received, which won't happen since they're late next week. But these are the things we'd go for. And if you are preparing testimony or providing information or having discussions with members or staffers as a constituent or as a resident, your best bet is to give a personal story of how this has impacted you personally or your community, and then if you can tie it to some of these talking points or that reinforce those points in your story, that is the best way to do that, is speak with one voice. Okay, I was going to go, although, Stephanie, did you have anything you would like to add to that, actually, before I go to that last one?
No, you have actually done a great job of pulling down the important points, and it's fine if you go to provide testimony to reiterate these points or include them word for word, is fine too. This is the stuff that they should be doing to have a quote unquote fair and open process that a federal district court had asked them, demanded that they have this time around. So as many people that can reiterate these talking points in their testimony, the better off we are. Also, though, it's very important that you try to include info on your specific community. So define the boundaries of it, define some of the features that actually make your neighborhood a community. Like I mentioned before, watershed areas, school districts, healthcare centers, even where you shop. If you can define this, it really helps the committee be able to, draw the maps. They'll take that into consideration.
All right. Now this is the timeline. Honestly, we've already done some of these things, but we need to continue to do them. But where we are today is January 20th. We are not expecting delivery of census data to Texas in February anymore. It could come anywhere in here. And as we've already pointed out, depending on when it comes, before or after the legislature adjourns, it could kick a special summer session, or it could kick into the legislative redistricting board. The one thing that is up here, which is on the next slide also, is the League of Women Voter Lobby Days, which we have the link for you to register for, and would encourage you to consider signing up for to see. And be prepared to engage during the hearings, or to support the League in providing testimony in hearings as we are available to, or as we are asked to do, or available, have the opportunity to do. And Stephanie, do you have anything else on that, on this particular slide, as far as the timeline moving forward?
No, the timeline is just very much up in the air, but the one thing I did want to mention about lobby days is the registration is open now, and for the featured guest speaker that we have opening up the event, it's going to be Michael Lee from the Brennan Center. Michael Lee is from Texas, but he follows very closely the redistricting litigation that's happened here in the past decade. Not only that, but the Brennan Center has done a lot of research into the benefits and fairness of independent redistricting commissions, and he'll be able to share some of that research with you guys. So if you wanted to advocate in support of it, you could take research along with you. So that was a point of asking him.
Okay, so this is how you can help. The first part of this is inform yourself, and I believe it was probably on the next page. Part of that is participating in events that you can find through the League of Women Voters Texas Facebook page, plus the League of Women Voters Comal Area Facebook page, and these other sources, public radio, public TV. You can also review the hearings that League of Women Voters Texas sponsored in December, in the absence, in the vacuum that was created when neither of the committees were doing any hearings. And those were actually some very good input. And here's the registration link which will be on our Facebook page for you guys, and is already, I think, there actually, to register and the date and time of it. This is the, still believe she's the committee chair. Ashley Westenhover is the committee clerk for the House Committee on Redistricting. Actually, I got it backwards. It's the House Redistricting Committee, and her email address to provide input, your comments on redistricting to her. And the Senate did have an online portal. I don't know if they'll take that down or keep that up. Do you know, Stephanie?
They'll be keeping it up, and most likely, I'm not sure if the House will be implementing one. I think that was part of the House rules that they adopted. Nonetheless, Ashley is a great committee clerk. She did a fantastic job for the past 2 years that she was helping. So if you email her, she can get the testimony to the right spot.
Okay, and this is, I can't see the title, but the title is How You Can Help. And I know that if you want to talk, at least as an intro way, I believe that there will be a way later for us to help at the state level, help you in some of the, kind of alluded to it, in reaching out to legislators and staff, but also just helping the state build a better structure for, or build a more robust structure for advocating for redistricting, for the redistricting process this year. Did you have any?
At the national level, the league has implemented for the past year our People-Powered Fair Maps program. Texas, every state actually was the recipient of a certain amount of grant money. We didn't receive too much because we don't have very much that we need right now. We don't have a ballot initiative that we can work with. We don't have litigation that we're paying for or anything like that. Nonetheless, they have some great programming, so we're going to be trying to implement that over the next 6 months. Everything from drawing district maps to trying to think of some of the other stuff, creating a speakers bureau, also just creating materials on, you know, creating a fair and open process or what is included in this redistricting litigation. So there's a lot of chances to get involved. Daphne hopefully will be helping with navigating the lobbying efforts, because you used to work with the Army on Capitol Hill doing that. And so Daphne hopefully will be able to lend some of her expertise to help us out and figure out a good strategy for how to advocate and meet with legislators up at the Capitol as we move through the session.
Advocacy is great. And just for the Comal area members, we do have a redistricting committee. They are great. They consist of the vice chair is Jency Madden, and then there's Don Medeiros, Eva Ott, and Robert Ingalls. So if you want to join us, that would be very welcome, because this is it's going to be a process over the next few months that is very has a lot of activity in it. It's going to be, I think, kind of a tight, not tight, but packed, relatively short period. And it could extend beyond, but we could use your help. So I'll just put that out there. And I would like to thank you, Stephanie. I think it's time for questions now. We can open it up, or take this down, and we can go to Roxana and Jerry.
I didn't get to see any questions in the chat. Judy Ackerman did put up the link to the Senate Redistricting Committee. So it is there, and Jency reminded people about the LWV Texas Capitol Report. We have people on Facebook watching this, but there's only 13 participants on this call. So if people would like to unmute themselves and turn on their video so we could kind of see each other, and maybe, and if Judy, if you have something to offer, because Stephanie said you had already been working.
Okay.
I just sent an email to the chair Actually, it was, his name is Sean Oberman. He's the general counsel for the Senate Special Committee on Redistricting. And basically, they are confused and not have their act together yet. He was pretty upfront about that. But by tomorrow, end of day, they hope to have everything posted on that website. So it'll give you the details of how to participate. Keep in mind that the hearings start Monday, 9 o'clock your time, 8 o'clock my time. So that's why I was pretty urgent about tell me how to do this. And basically it's all going to be posted up on that website.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? Please feel free to unmute yourself and show your video if you would like.
I'd just like to add that we will have the How You Can Help handout available on Facebook and on the website tomorrow for anyone who wants to get a copy of that. I've posted Judy Ackerman's information about the committee website on Facebook in the comments.
I wanted to add, so next week, the committee hearings are going to go pretty quickly, but the first 5 that they're holding are going to be for regions of the state. And they did state on the paper that they sent to me that, you know, if you show up on the wrong day, like you show up to the North Texas hearing, you'll still be able to provide testimony. So I think we might have a little bit of leeway if you can't get prepared in time, whatever, whatnot, you might be able to participate in another committee hearing.
Is there a San Antonio or Austin area day, or is the schedule going to be like put on their website? I didn't. The schedule, hearing schedule.
I will pull it up right now if you give me just a second, and I can share it with you so we can look at it.
The schedule's already posted on that website, the link that's in the chat.
Okay. Is it already there? So I will just click on that one then.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Schedule. I'm gonna let you do the schedule.
Which one were you asking about?
The El Paso and the other areas like North Texas or regional hearings.
El Paso is Monday at 9. And then North Texas is January 27th at 1 p.m.
Okay, so San Antonio is February 3rd.
So you have January 28th for Central Texas. So you can provide testimony at that one. And then there's a regional focus for San Antonio, it looks like, on February 3rd.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful and useful.
Wasn't very easy to find on the website though. That's what was taking me a second. So this is the website, but when you click on it, you'll have to scroll down and then you'll have to look specifically for regional hearings if anyone wants to look at it later. You can also sign up for committee notices through the Texas Legislators website. All of that's available. I believe on the homepage, you can kind of fumble your way through it. It's completely straightforward, but it's not impossible to do. But then you'll receive notifications for when committee hearings are. You can even track bills on their website as well. So they'll send you notifications like, hey, your bill's going to be heard in committee, in case you wanted to go and provide testimony for it. So yeah.
Is there an advantage to being at one of those hearings as opposed, I saw on that website, you could also just leave comments?
Yeah, you can leave comments too. The one thing that we are concerned about, advocates and like the people that I speak with at the ACLU and stuff, is that there's no guarantee that they'll actually read whatever you submit. So if you have the capacity and the ability to, it would be great for you to provide testimony again to the Senate or for the first time. Yeah, just so you know that at least one or two of them might be able to hear it, or however many happen to be on the call that day.
can I just add something too? For the people who may feel uncomfortable about, they don't know what to say, you know, I want to go on to a meeting and be like me right now, going fumble, fumble, fumble. One of the things you can, well, two things you can do. One is to go to the League of Women Voters advocacy page that Stephanie has put together for redistricting. And there's some great guidelines for how to write your testimony or your comments. And the other good thing to do is on the Fair Maps website are videos of some hearings that were done, and you can actually just watch people and hear what they say and realize I can do that, and just figure out how you can make your comments fit for your particular community. It's not as scary as it might seem if you've never done anything like this before, because I can understand that it might feel scary. So, you know, just prepare yourself and don't worry about it. You can do well. And they need to hear from people to tell them that this is an important thing that people are watching, that we care about how they draw these districts. It's going to make a difference for 10 years. Everything that you care about, whether you care about women's health or you care about children's education, those decisions are going to be made by the people that get elected according to how the districts are drawn. So this is important. We need to really speak up. Thanks.
Thanks.
I was going to say, add one more thing to that. Even if you don't want to provide testimony, like oral testimony, you can still submit written testimony through their portal. Also, though, we really need help notifying the community. Like 5 days, 6 days is not enough time to, you know, tell community groups about this. So if you guys have community groups that you work with, this would be a great opportunity to just pass on the word and say, hey, they're having this redistricting hearing. It's important for you to participate. So if you guys have a list of groups that you work with regularly, anything like that, it'd be great to pass this on to them so they have an opportunity to participate.
Well, thanks, Daphne. Thanks, Stephanie. Jinsey, thanks for your comments. Thanks, Judy. Thanks, everyone, for participating. I am going to stop the recording. Maybe.